Hello everyone, welcome to the Mr. Bean Family Story Channel. This is where every day we bring you interesting, fun, and inspiring stories from the Mr. Bean family. You'll meet me, Mr. Bean, someone you're probably already familiar with, and I hope you love my son with his surprising and meaningful stories, and my lovely daughter, who always brings positive energy with stories that are close to life. Each day, one of us will share new stories, exciting journeys, and today is my turn. I'll take you on a fun adventure, but also with deep life lessons. Today's story carries a simple yet important message. Never judge something by its appearance. Behind that appearance, there are always surprising things waiting for us. If you enjoy the lively atmosphere of our family, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our stories on this amazing journey. Share this video with your friends, family, and loved ones, and don't forget to leave your fun comments so I know what you think. Now let's dive into today's story and immerse ourselves in a world full of surprises. Let's go! Emily Lawson adjusted the secondhand uniform that clung to her frame, the fabric worn and faded from years of use. At 53, her hands told a story of 30 years spent in the service industry. Each wrinkle and callus a testament to countless plates served, tables cleared, and customers' demands met with quiet grace. She moved through the elegant dining room of the Grand Fork, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of New York, where the polished floors reflected the gleam of crystal chandeliers. The room was filled with men and women dressed in designer suits, dining on dishes that cost more than Emily earned in a week. Yet she moved through it all with practiced ease, a woman who had learned long ago that dignity was not defined by the wealth of the people around her. Her feet ached as she walked, the rain from her two-bus commute still soaking through her shoes. But her expression remained steady, her smile warm despite the exhaustion that clung to her like a shadow. It wasn't just her feet that were tired. Her heart often carried the weight of mounting bills, a sister's medical expenses, and the unrelenting fear that her dreams, like so many others, might never come to fruition. She often whispered to herself, "Just one more year," though somehow that year had stretched into 5. But Emily never stopped dreaming, even as life seemed determined to push her dreams further out of reach. Today, the dream was as close as it had ever been, the idea of opening a French bakery, a place where she could finally do what she loved. "Table 7 needs water," the manager barked, snapping Emily back to reality. "Right away, sir," she replied with the same calm efficiency that had served her well all these years. There was no room for hesitation, not in a place like this. As she approached table 7, the sound of clinking silverware and quiet conversations filled the air. Emily set the glass of water down with a practiced hand, making sure it was placed just so, near the edge, but not too close to the plate, as if she were an artist arranging her work. Her gaze flickered over the patrons briefly, noting their air of sophistication. Some of them she had seen before, regulars who never seemed to look up from their phones or acknowledge her existence beyond a brief nod or murmur of thanks. But there were always a few who stood out. Today it was a couple seated at a corner booth, a man and a woman, elegant and poised. They seemed different somehow, distant from the usual crowd. She focused on her task, refilling drinks, clearing plates, and keeping an eye out for the next need. In her world, it was all about anticipating what someone might want before they even asked for it. The rhythm of service was ingrained in her bones, a silent dance she'd been perfecting for decades. But today, something felt off. As she moved around the room, her attention kept drifting back to the couple, especially the man. He sat at the edge of the booth, his eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made her feel as if he were studying each and every person, as if he were trying to uncover something beneath the surface. She didn't recognize him, but something about him intrigued her. His poised confidence, the way he carried himself with an almost magnetic presence. She hadn't expected to see someone like him in a restaurant like this. He was different from the usual crowd. Of course, she never had the luxury of wondering much about her customers. She was here to serve, not to be noticed. Still, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to step into a world so different from her own, a world where power, influence, and wealth were simply assumed. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the room, and a strange feeling stirred in Emily's chest. The connection was fleeting, but it lingered. She quickly turned her attention back to the tasks at hand, reminding herself that she didn't have time to think about things like that. The lunch rush was in full swing, the hum of conversation mixing with the clatter of silverware and the soft murmur of jazz playing in the background. Emily moved through the crowd, fluid and unobtrusive, her movements a practiced dance as she refilled drinks and cleared empty plates. The restaurant, with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, held an air of old-world elegance that never quite felt like it belonged to her. She was just a fixture, a part of the background, like the chairs or the polished tableware, her presence unnoticed unless something went wrong. But today, something was different. As she made her way to table 12, the couple caught her eye again. The woman, sitting with her hands delicately folded on the table, exuded a quiet grace, the kind that spoke of wealth and refinement without ever needing to announce it. She looked as though she belonged in this world of luxury and privilege. The man, however, was another story. His presence was commanding, his sharp eyes scanning the room with the precision of someone who had spent years analyzing people, spaces, and opportunities. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her, too. She set the water glass down at their table with the kind of efficiency that came from years of practice, her gaze flicking between the two of them, noting the subtle tension in the air. The woman, Catherine, hadn't looked up when she arrived, and when Emily asked if they were ready to order, it was the man, James, she assumed, who answered for them. "Grilled salmon, no sauce for her," he said with the authority of a man used to getting what he wanted. "And I'll take the filet, rare." But before Catherine could voice her own preference, she hesitated, glancing at James for a moment before speaking up. "Actually," Catherine interjected softly, "I think I'll have the chicken today." Emily noticed the change in the air, something imperceptible but real. James paused, his eyes flicking up to meet hers for the first time. There was no softness in his gaze, but there was something else, an assessment, a flicker of curiosity. Emily quickly collected the menus, but the feeling lingered. She moved away, her heart pounding slightly faster than usual. There was no reason for it, of course. He was just another customer. But something about the way he watched her made her feel seen. As Emily moved back toward the kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. James's gaze had lingered a moment longer than usual, his attention almost too focused for a regular customer. It was unsettling in a way, but it also sparked a tiny flicker of curiosity within her. She had served countless people over the years, some polite, some indifferent, and a few downright rude, but never had one customer's eyes seemed to linger quite like his. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on her work as the day's hustle continued around her. By the time she returned to the table with their entrees, the tension between the couple had shifted too. Catherine seemed to be relaxing, her shoulders less stiff, her posture more open. It was clear that her earlier discomfort had begun to melt away, but the moment didn't last long. James was still wrapped up in his own world, his gaze flicking back to Emily as she placed Catherine's chicken in front of her. "Your chicken, ma'am," Emily said softly, trying to make the interaction as seamless as possible. She didn't want to draw attention, just wanted to do her job and keep the peace. But when she looked at Catherine, the woman's eyes met hers with an unexpected warmth. "You've been so kind today," Catherine said, her voice more relaxed than before. "It's made a difficult day much easier." Emily smiled, a little taken aback. "Just doing my job, ma'am," she replied, keeping her tone humble. But a flicker of pride warmed her chest. She couldn't help it. There was something about Catherine's sincerity that resonated with her. The woman wasn't just another customer. There was a depth there, a vulnerability beneath the surface. James, however, didn't seem to share the moment. He glanced at his wife, then back at Emily, his eyes narrowing slightly, as though the entire exchange had been noted and filed away for later. His next question was unexpected. "Have you always been in the service industry?" James asked, his tone casual, but with an undercurrent of something more, something like genuine interest. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. Most people didn't bother with such personal questions, seeing her only as the woman who brought their food, nothing more. But there was something in the way James asked, as if he truly wanted to know. Most of my life, Emily answered, her voice steady, though her heart raced a little. I trained as a pastry chef once, actually. French pastries. Her words seemed to catch his attention. He leaned forward, studying her with a sharper focus than before. French pastries, he echoed, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. That's quite a skill. What's your specialty? Emily's eyes lit up. For the first time that day, she felt a spark of excitement. Butter and patience, she said with a soft laugh. My grandmother was from Normandy. She taught me everything I know about making pastry, how to take your time and let the dough rise properly. It's all in the details. Catherine smiled, listening intently. That sounds incredible, she said, her tone warm. You must have a real talent. Before Emily could respond, James interrupted. How long have you had the dream of opening a bakery? He asked suddenly, his question surprising her. It wasn't the typical question she received from patrons. Most people didn't even know her name. She paused, a lump forming in her throat. She had always carried that dream with her, even when life's demands had pushed it further away. Nearly 30 years now, she admitted, her voice soft. Started small, but then my sister got sick. I needed steady work with benefits more than I needed to chase dreams. James leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he processed her words. Emily didn't notice the shift in his expression. She was too lost in the quiet ache of those words, the weight of years spent deferring her dream. She didn't realize that James wasn't just listening to her story. He was calculating, thinking ahead, the wheels in his mind already beginning to turn. The following morning, Emily stood in front of the modest mirror in her apartment, adjusting the collar of her faded uniform. The same mirror that had seen her through countless shifts, countless moments of self-doubt, now reflected the quiet determination that had begun to settle into her bones. The routine was as familiar as the back of her hand. The hum of the old coffee maker, the careful application of lotion to hands weathered by years of work, the steady rhythm of the city awakening outside her window. But today was different. Today, the weight of yesterday's conversation with James Blake lingered in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about his question. How long have you had this dream? It had caught her off guard, not because it was a hard question, but because someone, especially someone like him, had taken the time to ask. It wasn't just idle conversation, not like the usual small talk she was used to with her customers. He had truly listened, and there was something in his eyes when she spoke about her sister, Margaret, and her unrelenting struggle with MS. Emily hadn't shared that part of her life with anyone in a long time. Yet with him, she found herself opening up in ways she hadn't planned. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from her manager at the Grand Fork. You're off today with pay. Don't be late for your meeting. She stared at the message, a mixture of disbelief and confusion swirling inside her. She hadn't agreed to any meeting. And yet, as her gaze fell back to the reflection in the mirror, she knew. She knew that something was about to change. Emily stood still for a moment, the phone still clutched in her hand, as if the message might change or disappear if she didn't acknowledge it. She set it down on the counter and sighed, trying to steady her nerves. The idea of a meeting with someone like James Blake, the man who had come to symbolize everything she had never dared to dream for herself, was both terrifying and thrilling. He wasn't the type of person who gave opportunities away easily, especially not to someone like her. She had learned that lesson long ago, through years of silent struggle, watching others get ahead while she stayed stuck in the same place, doing the same thing every day. But today was different, wasn't it? Her fingers trembled as she smoothed down the creases in her uniform, though she had no idea why. It wasn't as if she had anything to wear besides the second-hand outfit, the one that had served her faithfully through countless shifts at the Grand Fork. Still, she found herself wishing for something else, something that might help her feel like she belonged in a world where the rules were so different from her own. But she quickly dismissed the thought. She wasn't here to dress for James or anyone else. She was here because something about her conversation with him had struck a chord. And maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to finally take control of her own destiny. Minutes later, she stepped out of her apartment, locking the door behind her. The city had already started to pulse with its usual energy. But as she walked to the corner, where the sleek black car awaited her, Emily felt as though she were stepping into a different world entirely. The contrast between the rough, familiar streets of Brooklyn and the polished, expensive car in front of her was jarring. As she slid into the back seat, her heart raced. She didn't know what to expect from this meeting, but one thing was clear. Her life, her dreams, everything she had known up until now was about to change. The building was everything Emily had imagined, and more. Meridian Investments towered above the city, a sleek and imposing structure that seemed to hum with power and prestige. The lobby was vast, marble floors reflecting the bright overhead lights, with walls lined with contemporary art and polished wood. It was a far cry from the cramped, faded corridors of her apartment building in Brooklyn, a world away from the grease stains and clattering dishes of the Grand Fork. Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she walked through the space, trying to make her movements as natural as possible. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, each step she took more uncertain than the last. Rebecca Harrington, James Blake's executive assistant, led her through the pristine lobby, the heels of her designer shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. The disapproving glances from the staff as they passed by didn't go unnoticed by Emily, but she refused to let it show. They were looking at her, the woman in the faded uniform, the waitress who didn't belong in this world. But Emily had learned long ago to keep her head high. No one could take her dignity from her, not her circumstances, not their stares. Rebecca gave her a polite smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Blake is expecting you," she said, her voice all business. Emily nodded, swallowing hard as they stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft chime. Her reflection in the glass was a stark contrast to the modern surroundings, the worn uniform, the rough edges of a life lived in survival mode. The elevator ride felt endless. Emily's heart thudded loudly in her chest, her thoughts a whirlwind of doubt and possibility. What was she doing here? What did James really want from her? The elevator doors finally opened and Emily stepped into the top floor of the building. The office was everything she had imagined, an expansive space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. The walls were adorned with minimalistic art, and the furniture was sleek and modern, all designed to project an air of controlled power. James Blake sat behind a massive glass desk, his posture straight, his sharp eyes already trained on her as she entered the room. "Ms. Lawson, please have a seat," he said, his voice calm, but there was a weight to it that made Emily hesitate before sitting down. The chair in front of his desk seemed too polished or too pristine for someone like her. She wasn't sure how to act, what to say. She had spent her whole life learning how to serve others, not how to sit in a room like this one. She carefully lowered herself into the chair, her hands resting nervously in her lap. James didn't immediately speak. Instead, he watched her closely, as if measuring every detail of her. The silence stretched for a moment, but Emily refused to break it. She had been underestimated for most of her life, but in this moment, she wasn't going to shrink. Finally, James spoke, breaking the tension. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday," he said, his eyes not leaving hers. "About your dream of opening a bakery. I want to make that happen for you." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Emily felt a rush of emotion, the kind she had spent years keeping at bay. Could it be? Could this really be happening? But her heart raced with skepticism. There had to be a catch. Why her? Why now? Emily sat in the sleek leather chair across from James, her heart racing, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. She had always dreamed of owning her own bakery, but this was something different. A billionaire sitting across from her, offering to make that dream come true with no strings attached. The weight of the moment felt almost unreal. For years she had scraped by, working long hours in a restaurant that would never see her as anything more than the woman who refilled water glasses. Now here she was, sitting in a pristine office, being offered a chance to change everything. James's calm demeanor only made her feel more out of place. He was used to making decisions that affected millions, not the life of a woman like her. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap. She couldn't bring herself to ask the question that was screaming in her mind. Why me? Why had he picked her, a waitress from Brooklyn, to invest in? What was he really expecting in return? James, as if reading her mind, leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on her. I know this is a big offer, he said, his voice steady. But I believe in your potential, Emily. What I'm offering is more than just financial backing. I'm offering you the opportunity to turn your dream into something real. Emily felt her chest tighten. There was something in his voice, something genuine, but also calculating. She had heard the same tone from countless customers over the years, the kind that made promises that were never fully kept. She needed more than words. She needed to know why he was so sure she could succeed, why he was willing to risk so much on someone like her. Emily remained silent, her mind working through the overwhelming flood of questions. The idea of actually having her own bakery, of turning that dream into reality, was something she had pushed aside so many times before. She had gotten used to the grind, the constant work just to keep things afloat. To entertain a dream now felt almost foolish. But James wasn't giving her a chance to back away, and there was a fire inside her, a spark of hope she had long buried. You must be wondering what I get out of this, James continued, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he anticipated her thoughts. The answer is simple. I believe in creating opportunities. I see the value in businesses like yours. And I'm not just talking about the money, the community where you want to open your bakery. It's a market that's being overlooked, and I see the potential there. Emily took a slow breath, her voice barely above a whisper. And what about the neighborhood? It's struggling. If I take your money, will it just become another piece of the city that gets gentrified, pushed out for the sake of progress? James sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. I've made sure that won't happen. The property I'm offering you is in the right location, yes, but I've ensured there are protections in place. The community will be included in the development. I want you to have full control over the bakery, and I want the local people to benefit. His words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Emily allowed herself to consider the possibility that this might not be like all the other broken promises she had encountered. Could she trust him? Could she really build something for herself and for her neighborhood without it being sold out in the end? Emily walked out of the sleek Meridian building with her head spinning, her heart still pounding from the conversation she had just had. She had expected to feel relief, to finally make a decision, but instead all she felt was uncertainty. The weight of James's offer hung over her, heavier than any of the concerns she had faced in her life. It wasn't just about the bakery anymore. It was about the future, her future, and the risks that came with it. Could she really trust someone like him? Or was this another opportunity that, in the end, would only serve to further erase people like her and her community? Outside, the city noise seemed to press in on her, the honking of car horns and the chatter of pedestrians, all blending into a low hum. Emily stepped into the cab that was waiting for her, giving the driver her address with a quiet murmur. As the cab pulled away from the towering building, she glanced out the window at the city passing by. So familiar, yet now filled with an eerie sense of unfamiliarity. She had always thought the city was her world, the only one she knew, the one she could control. But now it seemed like a world that was moving ahead, leaving her behind, or worse, threatening to swallow her whole if she didn't keep up. Her thoughts were interrupted as the driver pulled up to her building. She paid him and stepped out. The quiet of her neighborhood a stark contrast to the hustle of the city. She stood on the cracked sidewalk for a moment, taking in the faded storefronts, the worn buildings, and the sense of stagnation that hung in the air. It was a place where dreams were deferred, where people like her worked hard and got little in return. The thought of leaving it behind, of stepping into a world that didn't belong to her, was both terrifying and exhilarating. Emily stood in front of her building, the familiar scent of her neighborhood, smoke, old coffee, and city dust, clinging to the air. She had lived here for so long, in the same worn-out apartment, in the same tight-knit block of neighbors who understood the struggle of making it through each day. And yet, the thought of leaving it all behind made her stomach twist in knots. She had sacrificed so much already for others, for her sister, for the bills, for the rent. Could she really take a chance on herself now? The decision, for the first time, felt too big. What if she failed? What if the bakery idea was just a foolish dream, a mistake wrapped in the illusion of possibility? And what if, in making that leap, she lost the only place where she truly felt grounded? As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, the silence around her felt heavier than usual. Margaret would be waiting for her, as she always did, sitting in the worn armchair near the window. Emily could already picture her, the way her frail hands rested on the fabric of the chair, the quiet strength she had shown through years of illness. Emily had always been the one to care for Margaret, to be the steady presence when everything else seemed to fall apart. But now, for the first time, it felt like Margaret might be the one to help her find the courage to take the next step. "Hey, Maggie," Emily said softly as she opened the door, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts raging inside her. Margaret looked up, her smile warm as always. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, Ellie." Emily paused, unsure of how to voice what had been swirling in her mind all afternoon. But before she could say anything, Margaret's voice broke through. "You're thinking about the bakery, aren't you?" Margaret asked, her eyes knowing and patient. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Yeah," she whispered. "I'm thinking about it, but I'm scared." The next morning, Emily sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, the light from the rising sun casting a soft glow over the familiar, cluttered space. Margaret was asleep in her room, the steady rhythm of her breathing filling the quiet of the apartment. Emily had barely slept the night before, her mind running over and over the conversation with James, the offer that still seemed too good to be true. She had spent her entire life putting others before herself, sacrificing her dreams for the sake of survival. But now, with the bakery opportunity sitting in front of her, like an open door, Emily couldn't help but wonder if she had earned the right to walk through it. Her hands rested on the kitchen table, the warm cup of coffee forgotten in front of her as her mind raced. She had barely touched the contract James had given her. The numbers, the promises, everything seemed so out of reach, so far from the life she had known. And yet, there was something in her gut that told her this was the moment, the one she had been waiting for all these years. But was she ready to risk everything for a dream she had put on hold for so long? Emily's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She blinked, surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her first instinct was to ignore it. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. She stood up slowly and walked to the door, her heart already beginning to race. When she opened it, Rebecca stood on the other side, holding a sleek black folder in her hands. "Mr. Blake sent me," Rebecca said with a small smile, her tone professional, though there was something warmer in her eyes than Emily had expected. "We need to finalize the details." Rebecca stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking against the worn wooden floor as she moved through the cramped apartment. Emily instinctively straightened, feeling the weight of her modest surroundings in contrast to the polished, professional world Rebecca represented. She couldn't help but feel out of place as Rebecca made herself at home, setting the folder down on the table in front of Emily. "This is everything you'll need to review," Rebecca said, opening the folder to reveal pages of contract details, financial projections, and business plans. Emily's eyes skimmed over the documents, the numbers blurring together in a haze of uncertainty. It was all so much, so fast. She had spent years working tirelessly, but even in her best moments, the dream of a bakery seemed so distant. Now it was staring her in the face. Rebecca noticed the hesitation in Emily's eyes and softened her tone. "I know it's a lot to take in," she said, "but Mr. Blake believes in you. This isn't just a business deal for him. He wants you to succeed." Emily nodded, though her mind was still swirling with doubts. "And what's the catch?" she asked quietly, looking up from the papers. "Why me?" Rebecca hesitated for a moment before answering, her gaze softening. "Mr. Blake sees something in you, Emily. He believes your bakery could be more than just a business. It could be the heart of the community. He's not just offering you money, he's offering you the chance to build something lasting." The words hit Emily harder than she expected. The heart of the community. It was something she had never allowed herself to dream of, but it was something she deeply wanted. The thought of creating a space that wasn't just about profit, but about giving back, resonated with her in a way she hadn't anticipated. Her eyes dropped back to the contract, her fingers tracing the edges of the papers as the weight of the decision pressed down on her. "I'll need some time to think about this," Emily said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. "It's a big decision." Rebecca nodded, her expression understanding. "Take all the time you need. But remember, opportunities like this don't come around often." As Rebecca left, Emily sat alone with the folder, her thoughts a tangled mess of fear, hope, and possibility. This could be her chance to finally step into the life she had always dreamed of. But was she ready to take the leap? The days that followed were a whirlwind of decisions, paperwork, and relentless questioning. Emily had barely slept, her mind constantly racing. The offer James had given her, the one that seemed like a dream, was becoming more real with each passing day. And with that reality came an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She couldn't help but question if she was truly prepared for what was to come. The bakery would be hers to build, to nurture, but it would also be the thing that could break her if she didn't get it right. She had spent her whole life working for others. Now, for the first time, she was about to work for herself. Sitting at the small kitchen table with the contract spread out before her, Emily traced the edges of the papers, her fingers trembling slightly. Her thoughts kept drifting back to her sister, Margaret. The idea of finally making her dream a reality was the kind of moment Emily had never dared to imagine. But could she really do this? Could she take the risk, knowing how much was at stake? There was a comfort in her routine, even if that routine was exhausting. The familiar grind of her shifts at the Grand Fork had become a safety net, even if it wasn't the life she had imagined for herself. The bakery was a risk, a leap into the unknown. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Rebecca again, standing in the doorway with that professional smile, but this time there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't just here to hand over papers or check in on progress. This time, it felt more like a conversation was about to take place. "Let me know when you're ready for the next part." "May I come in?" Rebecca asked, her voice softer than usual. Emily stepped aside, allowing her to enter, and they both sat at the small table. The quiet of the apartment felt heavier now, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. "I know this is a lot to take in," Rebecca began, her gaze steady, watching Emily with a level of sincerity that caught her off guard. "And I understand if you're still feeling unsure. This is a big step. But James really believes in you, Emily. He sees your potential, not just as a baker, but as someone who can make a real difference in this community." Emily nodded, absorbing the words, but doubt still lingered at the edges of her mind. "I've spent my whole life working for other people," she said quietly, "always doing what's needed, never asking for much in return. I'm not sure I know how to make decisions for myself, not like this." Rebecca leaned forward, her expression softening. "That's why James is so invested in you," she said. "He knows this isn't just about baking. It's about you finally getting the chance to be seen, to take control of your life and your future. You're not just getting an opportunity to start a business. You're getting the chance to define who you are, to build something that's truly yours, something that matters." Emily looked at the contract again, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't just about opening a bakery. It was about her stepping into a new role, one that carried more than just the promise of success. It was a chance to create something lasting, to be a part of something bigger than herself. But that thought also brought a deep, undeniable fear. The decision had been made. Emily sat on the small bench outside her apartment, staring at the crumpled contract in her hands, her heart pounding as the morning sun filtered through the leaves above. The weight of the choice settled deeper with every passing second. She had made her decision. She was going to take the leap. But as she thought about the bakery, the neighborhood, her sister, everything seemed to become a blur of hope and fear all at once. Was she really ready to start a business? To take control of her life in a way she never had before? In the days following her meeting with Rebecca, Emily had let the idea of the bakery consume her thoughts, each possibility more exciting and terrifying than the last. She thought of the people in the neighborhood, her neighbors, the small children playing on the corner, the elderly who sat on the benches every morning, the ones who had lived here for decades. Emily realized that the bakery could be more than just a place for French pastries. It could be a space where the community came together, a place that celebrated everything she had come to love about this area. It could be a symbol of hope, a sign that dreams were still possible, even when life tried to make them fade away. But that meant something more too. It meant giving herself a chance to be seen. She had spent so long being invisible to everyone except her sister and her customers, never asking for more, never expecting more. Now she had to believe that she was worth the risk, worth the time, worth the opportunity James had put before her. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. It was a message from James's assistant, Rebecca. "James is waiting for your decision. Let us know as soon as possible." The message seemed to linger in the air, the words hanging over her like a quiet demand. James was waiting. The finality of it struck her in a way that made her stomach flip. She had known this day would come, but now that it was here, it felt much more real, more intimidating than she had imagined. Emily stood up from the bench, her decision firming up with every step she took back inside. The apartment felt smaller now, the familiar walls no longer offering her the comfort they once had. She glanced at Margaret, still asleep in the next room. Everything she was about to do, everything she hoped to become, was tied to the future she would create, not just for herself, but for Margaret too. It wasn't just a bakery. It was her chance to give them both a better life, to stop living in the shadow of what-ifs and maybes. She grabbed her phone and dialed Rebecca's number, her fingers moving more confidently now. The ringing on the other end felt like the seconds stretching out, until finally Rebecca picked up. "Hi, Emily," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of anticipation. "I'm glad you called. James is ready to move forward when you are." Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm in," she said, the words feeling both like a relief and a challenge all at once. "I'm ready." The pause on the other end of the line was brief, but Rebecca's response was warm. "That's great to hear. I'll let James know. We'll start preparing everything right away." As Emily ended the call, she looked out the window at the street below. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of doubt dragging her down. She felt light, like something inside her had finally shifted into place. She wasn't just going to open a bakery, she was going to build a life. And with that, everything seemed possible. The grand opening of Emily's bakery was just days away, and yet she found herself standing in front of the shop, still uncertain. The building had been transformed, its dusty, neglected exterior now gleaming with fresh paint and an inviting storefront. The scent of freshly baked bread and pastries already seemed to fill the air, a promise of what was to come. She had worked day and night to get to this point, helping to select equipment, choosing recipes, hiring a staff. And yet, standing outside the door now, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't the bakery itself. That had come together beautifully. It was more the weight of what was about to happen. She wasn't just opening a business, she was opening the door to her own future, one that was full of uncertainties but also possibilities. It was both thrilling and terrifying. She looked around at the neighborhood, the same neighborhood she had grown up in, the place she knew and loved, the same streets, the same familiar faces. But this time, there was something different in the air. The change she had hoped for, the change she had worked so hard to bring to life, was finally here. Emily turned and saw Catherine, her face bright with enthusiasm, walking toward her. Catherine had become not just a friend, but an important ally in her journey, especially after their late-night talks about the neighborhood and community. Catherine was there for more than just business advice. She genuinely believed in Emily's vision, and that had meant more to Emily than anything. "Are you ready for this?" Catherine asked with a smile, her eyes sparkling. Emily gave a small laugh, though her heart was still racing. "I don't know if you can ever truly be ready for something like this," she admitted, "but I'm as ready as I'll ever be." Catherine placed a hand on her shoulder, her grip firm and reassuring. "You've done the hard part," she said. "Now all you have to do is share what you've built. This bakery is more than just pastries. It's the heart of this neighborhood, a place where people can come together. You've created something real." The words sank in slowly, but with them came a burst of courage. Catherine's belief in the bakery, in Emily's vision, was something that Emily hadn't realized she needed so badly. She had spent so much time doubting herself, worrying about whether she was worthy of the chance she had been given. But standing here in front of the bakery that was finally opening, she realized it wasn't just about the pastries or the business. It was about everything she had overcome to get here. "I couldn't have done it without you," Emily said, her voice thick with gratitude. Catherine smiled warmly. "You didn't just build this for yourself. You built it for everyone who needs a reminder that things can get better, that dreams can come true, and you built it for those who have always believed in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself." The words echoed in Emily's mind as she turned to face the bakery once more. It wasn't perfect, and the road ahead would be full of challenges, but it was hers. She had worked for it, fought for it, and now it was time to let the world see what she had created. As the first customers began to arrive, the excitement in the air was palpable. Emily stood at the counter, her heart pounding in her chest, a sense of accomplishment filling her to the brim. This was only the beginning. The bakery was no longer just a dream. It had become a living, breathing part of the community. The once empty storefront now buzzed with activity, and the aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries spilled into the streets, inviting customers inside. Emily stood behind the counter, her apron on, her hands moving with the familiar rhythm of someone who had worked in kitchens for years. It wasn't just the act of baking that brought her joy. It was the conversations, the smiles, the feeling of creating something that mattered to people. Each morning as the doors opened, a new chapter of her life began, and with it, the weight of her responsibilities grew. But it was a weight she embraced now. The neighborhood had started to change, not just in the way it looked, but in how it felt. People from all walks of life came to the bakery, not just for the pastries, but for the sense of belonging they found there. Locals who had once walked past the shop without a second glance now stopped to chat with Emily, to share a laugh or a story. It was a small but powerful transformation. The bakery had become a symbol of something more than success. It had become a beacon of hope for the community. Emily's days were long, filled with the work of managing the bakery, training new employees, and creating new menu items. But through all the hustle and bustle, she couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of peace settling in. She had worked so hard for this, fought so many battles to get to this point, and now, for the first time in a long while, she could see the fruits of her labor. But with success came new challenges. Emily found herself faced with the balancing act of growth and staying true to her roots. The bakery was thriving, but as word spread, more people from outside the neighborhood began to take notice. The area, which had once struggled, was now seeing the beginnings of gentrification. New businesses were moving in, and the cost of living was rising. It was exactly the kind of change Emily had feared when she first considered opening the bakery. One morning, as Emily was arranging fresh croissants in the display case, Catherine walked in, a thoughtful look on her face. She was no longer just a friend. She had become one of Emily's closest advisors, offering guidance not only in business, but in navigating the complexities of this changing world. "Do you ever worry about the direction things are heading?" Catherine asked, taking a seat at the counter. "About what happens when the neighborhood becomes a place that people like us can't afford to live in anymore." Emily paused, looking out the window at the newly renovated buildings sprouting up across the street. "Every day," she replied quietly, "but I keep reminding myself that the bakery is part of something bigger. It's not just a business. It's a part of this neighborhood, and I want to make sure it stays that way. It has to stay that way." Catherine nodded, her expression both empathetic and understanding. "You're doing more than just baking. You're helping to preserve something important. But it's going to take work, Emily. It's going to take making sure that the community remains at the heart of everything you do." As the morning rush continued, Emily knew Catherine was right. The bakery was just the beginning, and the road ahead would require even more from her. More decisions, more sacrifices, and more fighting for the neighborhood that had supported her all these years. But for the first time, Emily felt ready for the challenge. She wasn't just going to make her dreams come true. She was going to protect them. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Emily's bakery, casting a golden glow over the bustling shop. It was a crisp autumn day, and the air outside carried the promise of change. Inside, the bakery hummed with activity, the sound of laughter, the clinking of cups, the soft chatter of customers, and the sweet scent of freshly baked goods filling the room. Emily paused for a moment, standing at the counter, and allowed herself to take it all in. This was hers. She had built it with her own hands, poured her heart and soul into every batch of dough, and fought every step of the way to make this dream a reality. The neighborhood had changed in the time since the bakery opened, but so had Emily. She had grown into a woman who wasn't just a servant to others' needs, but someone who had a voice that was finally being heard. She had fought for the bakery, for the community, for her place in this world. And now, as she looked around at the smiling faces of her customers, her employees, and her friends, she knew that the fight had been worth it. Catherine walked in, as she always did, her presence a steady support for Emily in both business and life. She was no longer just the wife of a wealthy man. She had become an integral part of Emily's journey, helping her navigate the changes in the neighborhood and in herself. "Good morning," Emily said, her voice warm as she greeted her friend. Catherine smiled and joined her behind the counter, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They had built this together, piece by piece. "You've done it, Emily," Catherine said, her voice full of admiration. "You've created something truly remarkable here." Emily smiled softly, feeling the weight of those words settle in her chest. She had always dreamed of having something that was hers, but she hadn't known how deeply it would mean to her to see the impact it had on those around her. Emily leaned against the counter, her eyes scanning the bakery, watching as the customers came and went, each of them carrying their own stories, their own struggles, but all drawn to this little corner of the world. It was more than a bakery now. It was a gathering place, a symbol of resilience and hope in a neighborhood that had seen so much change. People from all walks of life, once divided by differences, now shared a common space, bound together by the simple joy of breaking bread. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel the heavy burden of fear that had plagued her for so long. She had done it. She had taken the leap, and it had paid off, not just for her, but for the entire community. The bakery had become a sanctuary, a place where dreams were nourished and the ties between people were strengthened. James Blake's investment had been the catalyst, but it was her unwavering determination, the support of those around her, and the love she had for her neighborhood that had made the bakery a success. It was never just about the money or the opportunity. It was about standing up for herself, for her dreams, and for the people she loved. As she turned to face Catherine, her friend's expression softened. "I'm proud of you," she said, the words carrying more weight than Emily could have imagined. "You didn't just open a bakery, you changed this place. You gave it a new heart." Emily felt the words wrap around her like a warm embrace. She had always known that her journey wasn't just about herself. It was about giving back, about showing the people she cared about that there was always hope, even when things seemed impossible. And now, standing here, in the place she had built, Emily knew she had found her purpose. Looking out the window, Emily watched as the sun began to set, casting a soft orange glow over the street. She had come so far. She had faced the unknown, fought through her fears, and emerged stronger on the other side. But more than that, she had built something that would endure, a legacy not defined by the wealth she had earned, but by the love and respect she had given to her community. In that moment, Emily realized that the true measure of success wasn't the bakery or the money. It was the connections she had made, the lives she had touched, and the pride she felt in being seen for who she truly was. And as the light faded outside, Emily stood tall, knowing that whatever came next, she was ready. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.